Hi, this is One Question Wednesday. I'm Jonathan Schechter, your host. On this episode, I decided to skip the guest and take some questions from my Instagram audience. So I go over a couple of things like what is my most memorable experience doing my self-development work, what are the benefits of doing breath work, and I also dip into sort of a 2021 wrap-up as well as what's coming next for the podcast in 2022. So I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to One Question Wednesday. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter, Blue Magic Alchemy, here on Instagram. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Normally I have a guest on, we ask them a question, then I kind of talk back and forth with them a little bit about their question and maybe even get some comments or some additional questions from the live audience. So today, this is the last show that I'm going to be doing for 2021, and I thought I would do something a little bit different. So this last week, I actually put out a couple of polls for what question you as the audience would like to hear me answer. And, this is something that I'm really excited about because I really appreciate everybody's supporting the podcast. This is the 14th episode. I've really had a blast doing it the last few months. And it's really thanks to the support of folks like you that really helps give me some drive to keep going because, the whole point of this podcast was to provide value for the people that are watching and listening to it. Like if you notice, if you have watched the show or listened to it, you might have noticed that I try to keep the questions at a very accessible level for the topic. We've talked about psychedelics. We've talked about how to integrate those psychedelic experiences and spiritual experiences into your, sort of human life. We've talked about breath work and meditation, cold exposure, mindset. But really, when I'm thinking of guests, I'm really thinking of what is accessible to people, what would be valuable to them if they were just starting off on this path. If they were just getting started with, self-improvement work, with transformational work, with plant medicine work, with breath work, what would be useful to them? And so I've always tried to keep it somewhat accessible, good things to know, frequently asked questions, misconceptions, things like that. So anyway, today I will be taking a few of your questions and I'm super excited. So the three things that I'm going to be tackling today, unless we get some additional questions in the live, is what is the most impactful piece of self-development work that I've experienced in my practice, which is a really cool question, and I really appreciate it. And the second question is, why should I practice breath work? Which, gives me a chance to just spin off into a whole lot of different topics. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on what is actually happening with the podcast, what's the next step, and some news about it. So awesome. So in terms of the most impactful piece of self-development work I've experienced in my practice. Okay, wow, this is a big question. It's one that I feel I could go off into a bunch of different directions with. Certainly, I am no stranger to transpersonal experiences. So transpersonal psychology, transpersonal experiences is when within an expanded state of awareness, or sometimes even just in regular life, a person encounters something that defies the sort of reality, normal kind of what we would think of as possible, encounters magic, encounters angels or spiritual beings. And, even before I really started to do a lot of self-development work and plant medicine and whatnot, I've had, several of these experiences. I mean, stone sober, just what the heck just happened here, especially within the context of, some of my Buddhist practice. And definitely like during the self-development work, there's been, especially with plant medicine, there's been several different things that just like don't make sense. But I'm there, I experience them. And then it's up to me to like kind of unpack them and try to integrate them, later, One experience that really sticks out to me when the first time that I read this question was an experience that I had like a couple of years ago. It was during a plant medicine ceremony, traditional Native American, and the medicine man was sort of gifted or allowed to, practice within these native traditional ways. So I felt really honored to be a part of that. And during that ceremony, I had this really strong experience where I saw very clearly how I treat myself like a victim. The way that it sort of came through was that there are things in my life, emotions that I don't like or behavior that I don't like, but when they come up, when they happen, it's like I feel like I'm hijacked. I feel like a passenger in a car that I have no control over who's driving it or where they're taking me. And it's just up to me to just kind of sit and ride it out, so to speak. And the sort of the impact there was like, wow, I'm not a victim. I'm not the passenger. I have control over this. Nobody's really coming to save me. So it's up to me to like take the control back, to start to change my emotional state, to start to change my mind state, instead of just waiting like I didn't have any control over it. And that experience really had a big impact on me. It really started to change the way that I experienced certain discomforts in my life. It made me be more intentional about the somatic work that I was doing and some of the other practices. And it really just, opened up my eyes to this place where I was keeping myself stuck. And I'm not going to say that it's something that I've integrated perfectly. However, time over time, I can make a different decision. I have resources now to help pull me up when I notice that I'm going down, or I'm feeling stuck. I have somatic resources. I have breathwork resources. I have internal resources about like who I am and the power that I have over my life. And so that's been a really impactful part of my self-development work. I used to get this feeling like an emotional thing would come up. I would just sort of get completely overwhelmed by it. And then internally, like I had this belief that there was something wrong with me and that until I fixed it, I couldn't keep moving. I couldn't keep going forward. And I think one thing that came out of that experience was like shifting that, was saying like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. This is something that I'm experiencing. And do I have the space to hold it gently and compassionately and, actively work to move through it, rather than this passive sort of experience where I just, I don't know if you've ever been, body surfing, and like when you're in the wave, or maybe even surfing, but like I used to experience this body surfing all the time, where the wave takes you and you completely lose control, and you're like tumbling and just going head over heels and completely out of control within the power of this wave. And you're just there, and you're just like waiting for the wave to stop so that you can stop too. So that's how I used to feel like emotionally. And, just realizing like, nope, this is something for me to work through and to hold, and a lot of that is another part of, my practice is just like learning to accept all the parts of me, even the parts that I don't really like, that I'm scared of, that are not comfortable. I've really started to learn to treat myself better, to speak to myself better. That actually came up on last week's podcast with Matt Gottesman, of like starting with yourself. If somebody came to you, like a really good friend, and they had a problem, would you speak to them the way that you speak to yourself internally? And just being aware of that relationship, being aware of those messages and that conversation has really helped to like open me up in a different way. Because I used to really be critical of myself and really get down on myself and really not treat myself very well. And then that also radiates out into the world. It radiates out into how I'm viewing people and treating people. So, to me, a huge part of my self-development has been like learning to be gentle with myself and love all the parts of me, even the ones that, are challenging and difficult. And then the last thing that I wanted to, kind of say about this is the somatic work that I've done, I feel like is one of the biggest keys to my self-development work, and it continues to pay dividends. I continue to have resources to, work with challenging things that come up. I continue to have awareness of like what is happening in my body. So like I'm not unconscious to the things that are triggering me for as long, because as soon as I'm aware of them, I can go, oh, okay, something's happening here. I need to go take care of myself, or I need to take a step back and take a few deep breaths. And for me, what's really helped is as somatic work has continued, internal family systems has also come into play. So if you're not familiar, internal family systems is a type of therapy. It's also called parts work, but sort of in a nutshell, the gist of it is that when we experience trauma, when we experience overwhelm, the body kind of shuts down and it stores that energy. But the way that it's stored, like in the memory, it's almost like however old you were when you experienced that trauma, that's the part of you that's sort of stored with the energy. So when I'm dealing with like something that happened during my parents' divorce, which happened when I was 4, a lot of times some of that work is just getting to that 4-year-old and letting him experience the emotion and the whatever it was, the memory, in a healthy way. What happened when I was 4 was I didn't have the resources or the capacity or the mental development to know how to deal with the things that were happening to me. And so I shut down. I got overwhelmed. And that 4-year-old is still in there. Like he's still attached to that energy. So part of the somatic work is like, okay, first cluing into to the sensation, and really like getting into the root of it. And then oftentimes once I really connect to that energy, I can feel like another person And it is me, it's a part of me, but 4-year-old me obviously is different than 40-year-old me. And so like really being able to sit with that part and say like, hey, what do you need right now? And so, the holistic psychologist calls this reparenting. Somatic experiencing calls it inner resourcing. It's like being able to give yourself what you needed, as, in that moment that you didn't get. And oftentimes that 4-year-old just wants a hug. He wants to be able to cry. He wants to be able to experience whatever pain is happening, and he just wants to be okay. Wants to know that it's okay. And so, like, I have resources now. Me as a 40-year-old, me as somebody who's done self-development work. I've been able to tap into like different inner resources, different like higher parts of myself that can come and give that 4-year-old some comfort and just say like, hey, it's okay. It wasn't your fault. Go ahead and cry it out, And so yeah, the somatic work has been so important because not only for the things that I know about, the complex trauma like from my divorce, from my parents' divorce, other things that happened to me when I was a child, the shock trauma that I got from this shoulder injury. But there's also stuff that happens to us like when we're pre-verbal and at a really young age that it's like really hard to work with in cognitive talk therapy, because there might not be like a actual memory that you can remember that's attached to it. It might just be something that you can feel in your body. And so like somatic experiencing is less about like being able to pinpoint the root of it, the memory of it, and just going right to what is the sensation. It reminds me of a teaching from the Buddha where somebody came to him and started asking him all these different questions. Questions about like, are there multiple realities? Are there different dimensions? What happens after we die? All these like big philosophical questions. And the Buddha like listened, and then he said, let me ask you a question. If you got shot in the arm with an arrow, would you look at the arrow and say, gee, I wonder where that arrow came from. I wonder what kind of wood the arrow is made of. I wonder where the person that shot that arrow grew up and like how he's feeling and what he's doing with his life. No, you wouldn't. You would do as much as possible, as quickly as possible to pull the arrow out. And so I think in the same way, somatic experiencing says like, don't worry about the why, worry about the what. And the what is that you have somatic stuff happening in your body. It's discomfort. It's painful. It's, you might cry, you might get angry. It's preventing, you from being authentic and showing up in relationships the way that you want to. So let's worry about that sensation, not the why of it. So yes, SE work, super important to me. So hopefully that that gave some answers to that question. And thank you so much, Abe, for asking it. So the next question is, why should I practice breath work? I consider breath work in 3 separate categories because breath work has become such a big nebulous thing. It's sort of like, I exercise. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do you lift weights? Do you do Pilates? Do you do CrossFit? Be more specific. So same thing with breath work, right? So 3 different categories of breath work. The first one is awareness. So if you develop awareness of your breath and your body, that's meditation, that's somatic experiencing, that is just keying into what's happening in your process. And that can be very helpful on a variety of different fronts, right? Like meditation is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. The second type of breath work is what I call functional breath work. it's breath work that's specifically trying to regulate your nervous system. Usually it's down regulating it. Usually it's trying to help you calm down. It's getting you back into your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest system. It's getting out of your fight or flight. But sometimes it's an upregulating breath as well. You're actually trying to go into your fight or flight system for energy or for like emotional release. Most of the times you're breathing down regulating. You're helping your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that connects your autonomic nervous system to your brain and is sending sensations and information between your nervous system and your brain all the time. And if you are really interested in like a super deep dive on this, check out the episode with Connie Bisalski. She really goes in depth about like the vagus nerve and the nervous system. So anyway, that's the second type of breath work, right? Is like how can I use this breath work to regulate? Like if I notice I'm dysregulated, how can I use it to calm myself? How can I use it to perform better? Like with exercise, how can I use it to sleep better? How can I use it just to calm down? So those regulation functional types of breath work fall into that category. And then the third type is transformational breath work. That's really where I work the most in terms of clients. I work mainly with neurodynamic breath work, and it's a transformational type of breathing that you are using big breaths, big connected mouth breaths to create an altered state of consciousness, an expanded state of awareness. And within that, you can really work with somatic energy. You can get rid of anxiety and stress. You can really calm yourself on a very, very like deep way. It's a little more in depth and a little more nebulous than the functional breath work that's like, hey, I'm going to do this physiological thing to my nervous system, and it's going to calm me down. With transformational breath work, it is, you're able to meet your authentic self. You're able to access your like inner healer in a way that is very challenging for us to do during our day-to-day lives because we're so habituated to being in our thinking mind, being in our ego mind, walking it off, staying disconnected from our emotions, manning up, pulling your bootstraps up, all those things. We're urged and coached in our society to like not really connect with our emotional state. It's not something that's praised or valued in the mainstream. What is manning up, being a man, walking it off, brushing it off. It's no big deal, all those things. And so with types of breath work like neurodynamic breath work, we can really start to clear some of that emotional gunk that's gotten stuck. And as we clear it, we're able to connect with our authentic self. And oftentimes the breath work can be even more powerful than plant medicine or psychedelic because, number one, it's activating similar parts of our brain. What's part of our prefrontal cortex that's also known as the default mode network. It starts to quiet down when we do the breath work or we're taking plant medicines, and that allows this inner healing to come up. That allows things that are suppressed in your subconscious emotionally, somatically, to emerge if it's safe. And another reason why we should do it is the more we do these practices, the stronger they get as resources. Any type of breath work. The more meditation you practice, the more concentration and equanimity you're going to have. The more you practice these types of breath work to regulate your nervous system, the easier they're going to be to activate. I've been using it for the last 5.5 weeks with my arm and dealing with pain. And, as I've noticed myself, okay, I'm starting to get dysregulated, I can do breath work to calm myself down. And with the transformational breath work, the more you do it, the more you're building neural connections. From a neuroscience perspective, the neurons that fire together are wired together. And I always explain it like if you are going through a jungle, there might be a path that you use all the time. That path is worn. There's not a whole lot of stuff in your way. But let's say you decided to take a totally new path. You would have to take your machete and just start making it. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to be raggedy. It's not going to be very clean and pretty. You might have to go through it 2 or 3 times to really actually have it be a usable path. But each time you go through, you're wearing it down. You're making it more familiar. You're making it less scary. Because I don't know about you, the first time I take a new path, especially if I know a different way to go, it's like on a very sort of reptilian brain level, there's a level of danger. It's like, okay, well, wait, now I'm doing something that I'm not sure about. But the second or third, fourth time that I take that route, it's like, oh yeah, I've been here before. I know what's going on. And you can use breath work in the same way. So yeah, I really feel very passionately about breath work. It's something that, especially within self-development, everybody wants to do plant medicine. Plant medicine has a big, a lot of buzz around it right now. And certainly plant medicine is very, very powerful and transformational. But breathwork can be just as transformational. It's safer. It's legal, so that appeals to certain people. And you can integrate it in a different way. You can have the most transformational experience. If you can't integrate it, what good is it? It's just sort of, another experience that you've had, so, I really believe in the power of breath work. I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep having people, that are experts in the field on, and, just keep sharing it because it's just so transformational. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, thanks for hanging with me through this, is wanted to talk a little bit about what's next for the podcast. So big announcement. The podcast is now an actual podcast as well as being on IG Live and on my page. So there's a link in my bio. You can go to Anchor or Spotify or Apple or Google and search for One Question Wednesday. It's all one word. And you'll see every episode up into this one. So going into 2022 with all the 2021 episodes posted. Thanks for your support and thanks for suggesting that. That actually came about from talking with a couple of friends that were like, hey, that's great that you're doing a podcast. I don't use Instagram. Can you put it somewhere else? And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. So yeah, I'm really excited about that, and we're going to keep posting them. In terms of where I want to take the podcast, I really want it, like I said in the beginning, I want it to be accessible. I want it to be valuable for the listeners, especially if you're new to meditation or breath work or plant medicine, or you're struggling with integrating it. Maybe you had a ceremony and all of a sudden you realize oh, that was a lot. And now what do I do with it? So the whole point of the podcast is to give you some value and give you things that you can, either use in your own practice or maybe that spark your curiosity about trying something new. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I hope that I continue to get people's input as well. I would love to hear your questions. I would love to get your suggestions about, who should be on the podcast next, because I can always ask. They might not want to do it right now, but I've been surprised, reaching out to a few people that they've been, yeah, cool, let's do it. And I know that's going to continue into the next year. So yeah, as you see the posts in my stories, or just announcing like, hey, this is when the next episode's going to be. I'm going to continue to try to like talk a little bit about like, hey, this is a somatic person, this is a psychedelic person, this is a breathwork person. So if you're having questions, specifically about those topics, just shoot me a message or, reply to my story and let me know. And we can, ask them while we have access to these wonderful teachers and facilitators and practitioners. So yeah, I'd really love that. Stay tuned for some awesome podcasts in the new year. I'm already booked up for all of January, which is really exciting. I'm going to have my partner, who was our first guest, when I didn't really know what I was doing, come back, and we're going to talk about conscious relationships, conscious coupleships. Also have an awesome breathwork facilitator coming up. I have an awesome somatic practitioner, and a really cool friend of mine that does integration journals. So she's going to talk about how important integration is. So anyway, thank you so much for sticking with me and supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to it on, Anchor or Spotify or Apple, please subscribe, leave reviews, follow, whatever it is on that particular platform, because that helps move it up in the algorithm so more people can have access to it. And I just really appreciate your support and, sharing the podcast. And follow me on Blue Magic Alchemy on Instagram for more awesome content. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the year, great, restful, peaceful holiday season. And I will see you back here on One Question Wednesday in 2022. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Hope you enjoyed that episode of One Question Wednesday. I'll be back in a couple of weeks on IG Live with guests talking about things like integration, breathwork, somatic, and conscious coupling. So thank you for listening and supporting the podcast on IG. And if you don't already, please follow me at Blue Magic Alchemy. And hope you guys have great holidays.